Hey, welcome back. I'm Chris Chase with the Western Flyer Foundation. This is episode 26 in this series that's been following the rebuild of the Western Flyer. I've been out of town for a little bit, and while I was out of town, a lot of work got done on the boat, so we definitely have some catching up to do in this episode. But before I get into the episode, I want to give a big thank you to one of the viewers. The viewer's name is Dave. Dave was a wood shipwright in Alaska for almost 40 years, from the late 60s into the 90s. He worked in Chickney, King Salmon, Homer, Southeast, all over the place. And during that 40 years as a wood shipwright, he also picked up the skills of making handmade knives. Dave reached out to me maybe a couple of months ago, and he said he wanted to come down, meet me, talk about boats, and show me some of his knives. He made an appointment, he came down, we hung out for a few hours outside at that nice safe distance, and we got to know each other a little bit. And as he was leaving town, I said, you should take a few pieces of the original hull framing. He took a couple of, just little chunks of the original white oak hull framing. And when I got back from that trip to Colorado in the mail, there was this absolutely beautiful knife. I just got to say thank you, Dave, for this. This is just beautiful. He used those little pieces of white oak to make the handle. You can see that nice light tan burning into that, where that nail thickness is that black. It's a beautiful Damascus steel folded blade. Just absolutely beautiful craftsmanship. So much so, I actually told Dave I might shoot up to the San Juan Islands and do a little video about him making knives out of Western Flyer materials. But anyway, back to this video. Jordan and Ryan, they finished up those bulwark caps through the main working deck. And Tim and Pete Rust, I think they got those bulwarks on the foredeck. So let's see what's happened over the last couple of weeks. In episode 25, we got a great first look at the caps on the working deck being cut out, shaped, and installed. Since that episode aired, the rest of the working deck caps have been permanently installed, and they've even been painted black. I don't really have much to add in this part of the video. I just had some nice footage left over of Ryan fitting and installing a length of cap on the starboard side, and I thought I'd share it. After the last episode aired, I received several emails asking how the transition scallop from the 24-inch tall bulwarks in the middeck would transition down to that 12-inch section around the stern. During the Western Flyer's original construction in 1937, the transition was made using a solid timber cut out in shape to fit.
Like the day before, owns Stevens. So yeah,
The technique of creating a curve like that out of a solid timber unfortunately leaves a lot of in-grain and a lot of short grain exposed, allowing moisture to creep into the wood and eventually rot out the wood. Taking advantage of modern epoxies, the shipyard opted to laminate the curve out of 1/8-inch strips of the same wood that the rest of the cap rails were made out of, which was sapele. The first step would be to make a pattern of the finished shape, which then would be used to build a sturdy but temporary jig. The sapele would then be milled down to the finished thickness, right around 1/8 of an inch, and the glue could be spread. It should be noted that when you're laminating wood around a curved shape, either an inside shape or an outside shape, extra care needs to be taken with the clamping. The pressure from the wood bending around the shape, as opposed to gluing something flat, can leave the joint starved for glue.
Belly there.
And that's actually, I think it's going to go better than anticipated.
It's looking pretty good. So.
It's a fine line between getting a nice tight fitting joint and a glue starved joint. Any epoxied surface needs a bit of room to breathe. Contrary to other glue types where you really want a nice tight fitting joint, there needs to be several mils of glue thickness left in the final product to really get the structure you need. To guarantee that adequate thickness in the epoxy layer, thickeners are added to the glue during the mixing period, adding body to the glue and ensuring against glue starvation joints. Since the Western Flyer was built, epoxy is probably one of the most incredible additions to the boat builder's arsenal, but be safe. Working with it can be a real science, and if you're not careful, you can end up with some horrible outcomes. I recommend studying up before you dive into a pot of hot epoxy.
Good simple system here now.
This is just a little, just kind of like a kind of storyboard, whatever you want to call it. Just the kind of layout of where things are along here, and then giving me the direction I need to edge fasten this thing down into the upper shear plank here. It's just giving me the angle that I need to drill at, because I not only need to be in a specific range, but I don't want to go into the corking seam. We don't want to be hitting our irons against the fasteners here. So,
like on the main working deck, the first layer of wood against the deck beams and the outermost timber creating the deck's edge was a 2 3/8 inch thick Iroko covering board. Once all the covering boards, bulwarks, and forward caps are fully installed, 2 layers of 18mm marine plywood will be installed just like on the main deck. Glued and screwed to the beams, then glued and screwed together, and glassed over with 10-ounce fiberglass cloth and epoxy resin, ensuring a robust and watertight deck. Great care is taken during the dry fit stage to locate each bolt, lag, or screw, ensuring a solid foundations for the bulwark above. I may have said this in an earlier episode, but the number of fasteners may look excessive, but remember the covering board creates the deck's primary connection to the hull.
I want to just raise it 2 inches.
Unfortunately, there are no blueprints of the original Western Flyer. Like in so many shipyards of the era, most of the records, including plans, photographs, and blueprints, were lost in a series of fires. Lucky for us, the original port side forward deck bulwarks were still in place on the Western Flyer when she arrived in Port Townsend back in 2014. Before that section of the bulwarks was removed last summer, full-size patterns were made. Using a combination of the information recorded on the pattern and a few old photographs, an original profile shape was created. Tim made a full-size plywood pattern of the foredeck bulwarks and then lifted it up onto the Western Flyer and screwed it into place. Having a full-size pattern of both the plan view and the elevation view allowed the shipwrights doing the installation to reference a kind of master layout stick. The spacing of each timber, the rolling bevels, any information needed to lay out and cut a section of bulwarks could quickly and easily be referenced. Having so much information pre-worked out before any wood was cut allowed the crew to be way more efficient with their time. A timber could be cut out according to the master pattern, temporarily shimmed where it needed to be, the bottom edge would then be scribed to fit the next layer, and the entire thing would be power planed into shape. Within a few days of starting the bulwarks, Pete and Tim were laying out and installing 3 to 4 and even 5 lifts a day. This type of bulwark construction is called a stacked bulwark, as opposed to a plank bulwark you might see on other fish boats. So being a stack of timbers, all cut to the same curve and bevels, you start on the bottom layer. In the case of the Western Flyer, each timber or lift as they are called, on both port and starboard side were laid out, cut out, and temporarily fastened into place. Once all the lifts were fit in their final home, the whole thing was then pulled back apart, labeled and stacked, waiting for permanent installation. With so much effort put into the planning, layout, and fitting, one whole side of the boat, almost 30 feet of bulwarks, could be permanently installed in one long day with 2 shipwrights working. Sikaflex was chosen as the bedding compound for its flexibility and its adhesion properties. And before it comes up in the comment box, they couldn't find enough of one color Sikaflex to do the whole job. So you can see white, black, and maybe even mahogany Sikaflex being used. As long as they're all 291 Sikaflex, they all have the exact same qualities. With all the lifts installed, the cleanup and final fairing can be done. The next step would be the bulwark caps. Hey, that's it, the end of another chapter in the rebuilding of the Western Flyer. Certainly hope you enjoyed watching this one, and like all the videos before, I really enjoy making these episodes and bringing the project to life for everybody. I'm going to try to get back on a little bit more regular schedule, not so far between each episode. I got a lot of great content coming up. I've got some videos about the boat project, corking, just a lot of great stuff coming up. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and until the next episode, thanks again for watching.